Welcome to this session of OOIDA's Business Education Series, the most comprehensive educational series for America's professional truck drivers. This programming is being brought to you by the OOIDA Foundation, who is dedicated to research, safety, and education for the trucking industry. OOIDA is providing the online education series free to all viewers. You can find additional programming in this series by logging on to our website at www.ooidaonlineeducation.com or by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Simply search for OOIDA Business Education on YouTube. All right, let's get this program started. My name is Tom Gann, and I'm going to be your host for this program. And today I'm going to be joined by Dale Watkins. Dale is a compliance agent with OOIDA's Business Services Division. And today we're going to be talking about the National Consumer Complaint Database. This database was set up by the government to help people file complaints and to also have complaints investigated about trucking-related activities. This program, usually referred to as NCCDB, the government, they got to have an acronym. This program affects drivers in two different ways. One, drivers can file complaints against people, but also they can have complaints filed against them. And it's always a surprise when you receive that letter from FMCSA saying someone's filed a complaint against you. Let's talk a little bit about this program because I know most guys really don't know what it is, and the name is really misleading.
Yeah, the National Consumer Complaint Database sounds more like a place you're going to file a complaint on your washing machine or something, not on a motor carrier or anything like that.
Okay, let's talk about how does this relate to the trucking industry?
Well, it's a website with FMCSA designed basically for folks. You don't even have to be in the trucking industry to file complaints, either against motor carriers or brokers, moving companies, or even drivers. We have some members that can use it to file complaints against a motor carrier they're working for. We've also had this thing used against drivers when they were witnessed by supposedly the public, like doing a moving violation or something like that. It's just kind of a surprise letter that they'll get in the mail stating that their truck was witnessed on a so-and-so date at so-and-so time speeding or falling too closely, and this letter is just an information letter to the carrier, and of course
they're not receiving a summons for speeding.
No, and they don't even know who the driver is. All they're recording is the DOT number on the truck, informing the carrier that supposedly somebody witnessed this truck basically doing a moving violation. A copy of this letter, of course, will stay in their quote and unquote file with FMCSA and really won't be anything unless there's an audit someday. And of course, a motor carrier also can send in a written dispute stating, hey, I didn't have any trucks in that area, or or however they want to do in their defense. And of course, that letter will also stay, in their file with FMCSA.
How are consumer complaints filed against the motor industry?
Okay, basically, this database takes two types of complaints. One we're going to refer to as a consumer complaint, and the other is coercion complaint.
All right, let's talk about the consumer complaint first. It's in the name. Let's talk about that. How does that relate to the trucking industry?
Okay, the consumer complaint basically would be for people that's got complaints against moving companies, passengers on buses, you hired somebody to haul a car or automobile for you, or if you, consumer or the public, witness a truck that was violating safety regulations. Like they witnessed a truck that was falling too closely or speeding or something like that.
Didn't have his load secured.
That's another possibility, yes. Mm-hmm.
This also fits in with hazmat too, doesn't it?
Yes. Uh-huh.
So if somebody sees a hazmat vehicle leaking or doing something unsafe.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So actually, this complaint can be against company drivers. It could be against bus drivers. It could be against a motor carrier. And it could even be against a guy who's running under their own authority.
Right, right. Like I said, they're going to go be buying the DOT number. Anytime you file a complaint against a motor carrier, you have to have their DOT number in order to file that.
What kind of complaints would you be filing?
Well, like we've said first, if you're doing it against a motor carrier, probably for a moving violation. On the other hand, you got the coercion complaint. The coercion complaint is different than what we were just kind of discussing. Coercion complaint is when a motor carrier, a broker, a shipper, or a receiver, a freight forwarder is forcing a driver to operate illegally with the threat of some kind of a monetary or financial penalty.
Now, my understanding is that when the government first opened this website or started this website, it was designed just for consumer complaints only.
Yes.
But at some point, the government decided to open it up also to coercion complaints. Why'd they make that change?
Okay. Starting in January 2016, FMCSA designated this website as a way to file a coercion complaint. Basically, a coercion complaint is when a driver is being forced to drive illegal with the penalty of a financial penalty. This could be you're driving a vehicle with bad tires, a vehicle violation, could be forcing you to operate over your hours of service. The gist of it is you have to be threatened with some kind of financial penalty if you don't operate illegal.
So a motor carrier that tells you if you don't get this load delivered, I don't care if you're out of service, you're over your time. If you don't get it delivered, you're not going to get this next load.
Exactly. We're going to make you sad, or we're going to dock you $50 or $1,000 or whatever.
I don't care if your headlight's out. I need you to keep going.
Yes. Yep. I don't care if the road's closed and it's drifted. You just keep going through it one way or another.
And if you don't, you're not going to get this next load.
Right. Exactly.
So that would be what a coercion complaint is.
Yes, and that could be against truck drivers, could be against bus drivers, could be against owner-operators that's leased a carrier, and it could be an owner-operator's own authority where the broker's making that threat.
Could be a company driver.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You know, Dale, you just used two terms that we hear a lot, forcing and threatening a driver to do something illegally. And these terms, they're offensive to everybody. Nobody likes being bullied into doing something that they think is wrong or illegal. But in reality, sometimes coercion takes a much softer form. It may come in the form of a broker or a shipper applying pressure to a driver. You know, they make suggestions. It's almost like they're doing you a favor. For instance, a broker may tell you, well, I know it's going to be tough to get that load delivered with the hours of service and all, but if you could get it there tomorrow night, I know I can get you a load headed back home right away. You wouldn't have to wait. You won't have to do any deadheading. But you know, if it takes you that extra day, I'm not sure when I can get you another load or actually even where it's going to go.
Yes. Now, that's a coercion complaint. That is to be filed on this website, too. Basically, this would be complaints of what we refer to in the industry as anything in the 390s. Regulations. The 390 regulations basically deals with vehicle maintenance, hours of service, inspections, that kind of stuff. And again, I want to emphasize a coercion complaint is as a threat to withhold some kind of something financially from that driver for refusing to operate illegal.
It always amazes me how many drivers don't realize they've just been coerced in this situation. They think that shipper or broker did them a favor by finding them another load. They don't realize that shipper has just said, if you don't speed or if you don't drive beyond your hours of service, I'm going to punish you by not giving you another load. I'm going to make you sit and wait.
Yes. Exactly. Or say, well, you're going to set the rest of the week, or we're going to only pay you so much for this load, or we're going to dock you, or, some kind of a financial penalty.
Dale, what about lease agreement? If there's something that's violating my lease agreement, and there's a lot of things that have to be in a lease agreement, but if there's a violation against my lease agreement, is this where I'd file?
Yeah, you can do this also. But keep in mind, this is not going to be a coercion complaint, and this will be on the consumer side, and this would have to be filed 60 days after whatever happened here. But
what are some of the things that you might file against that? Would that be like not getting paid 15 days after I've turned in my paperwork?
Yep. Yeah, the carrier's not allowing you to review the rated freight bills when you go in there and ask to review a copy of it. There's deductions on the settlements that's not listed in the contract. The carrier's failing to provide you copies of the insurance that you're paying for. In term escrow, of course, this gets a little fine. You can't file a complaint within 45 days because of the escrow refund, so you got 15 days basically that you can file a complaint on them after that. But this is also for leasing violations.
Okay, is there a time frame on this? Do you just have a certain number of days, like 30 days to get it filed, or can you drag this out a while? You know, could you even go back and file something a couple of years ago, say, hey, I remember back in '03, my carrier did this to me. When do you have to get this done?
Okay, on the consumer complaints, it's supposed to be done 60 days after this action or whatever happened. And then if we're going to do a coercion complaint, you've got 90 days to file the complaint on that.
Now, that'd be a problem if you were filing on a escrow account or something like that.
Yeah, exactly, because your escrow account, you have to give them 45 days to refund it, and then if they don't, you've basically only got 15 days to file the complaint for them to take a look at it.
All right, let's talk a little bit about how you actually file this complaint. Now, I know this is going to sound funny when I say it, but I'm also going to put it up on the screen so you can read it. There's two ways to really file this complaint. One, there's an 800 phone number. Mm-hmm. And what is that number?
It's 888-368-7238. And that is actually manned by live people from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
And when you get a hold of somebody, they're going to walk you through how to file this complaint?
Yes. Again, you're going to have the DOT number. You know, if of course, shippers and receivers don't have DOT numbers, but against a broker or a carrier, you need the DOT number. But they will take that complaint over the phone.
And before you call, you need to have all your information right there so you can talk about it. And you need to be aware they're probably going to ask you to fax copies of this information to them. Right.
If any kind of supporting documentation, they're going to ask you to either fax it or scan it, email it, or something. You know, they've got to have documentation on it. And all I can't say enough is document. When you have one of these coercion complaints.
Well, nowadays, a lot of this communication's done over the phone or at least electronically, and you may not have any paper documents to fall back on. What do you do then?
If there's just a text message, if this is an email, if there's a screenshot on a Qualcomm, just whatever you can do, you know, in the writing. If you can't do that, I suggest to write down the date, the time, who you spoke to, and write out as close as you can, word for word, what the dispatcher or the motor carrier or the broker told you, and then hopefully pull up your phone records to show that there was a call to this number. Just anything we can do to document that.
Okay, Dale, you've mentioned documentation several times, and I know there's a bunch of things that we need to send in. Let's talk just a little bit about that. What kind of documentation is needed?
Well, first of all, anything in writing. This would be any emails or text messages, anything over the Qualcomm that you might be able to take a screenshot of. The government likes paperwork, phone conversations. The best thing you can do on that is log what time the call happened, what date and time, what number the call went to, and then write down the best you can of what was said. Witnesses, you know, was there anybody around when you was told this?
And if it was a safety violation, it could be a picture of what the issue is or the problem was.
Right, exactly. Yes, if they were making you drive with a bad tire, take a picture of it. Of course, you're going to be putting that on your post-trip inspections, document that also on those inspections.
And if it's, for instance, an hours service violation, I suppose you could make a copy of your logbook, or you could even print out off your EOBR if that's what you have in your truck.
Yes, and then also would back that up with some fuel receipts or toll receipts or some of the documentation to prove, you was where you said and date and time on that too.
And one thing I think a lot of drivers forget, they always say, well, there wasn't a copy machine around. Well, you can take a picture of it with your phone. That works just as well.
Yes, yep. A picture's worth 1,000 words regardless of what you're doing in this business.
Yeah, there's really not an excuse for not having this documentation.
No, huh?
Now, if you want to try to do this on your own, you can get on the website yourself. And that website is www.nccdb.fmcsa.dot.gov. I know that sounds like a lot, but it's up on your screen there. You can go on the website and you can follow the steps and do all of this yourself. Now, for those of you who are members of OOIDA, we got a better deal. Tell us about that.
Okay. We will help members to file these things in-house. We've done quite a few of them, actually. But, again, we're going to want, send your supporting documentation. We'll help you on what we think you have that would work on this. But this is just another service that we provide under business services.
Now, let me ask you this, because a lot of guys are going to want to know this. If I'm driving for a motor carrier, I'm leased to a carrier, and he's been putting pressure on me to drive beyond my hours, and I go to file this complaint, will he know about it?
I doubt it. I mean, I don't think a lot of people knows about this. I mean, this would be what you're describing basically would be a coercion complaint. We had a lot of press in January 2016, but a lot of this stuff doesn't get out.
So they may just get this complaint letter or investigation documentation, and they may be more surprised about even getting this letter or documentation than they are about the complaint.
Right.
Now, I know on the online complaint form, you've got the option of either filing this complaint anonymously or letting them know who's filed it, letting them know your name.
Right.
And I guess in our experience, we've discovered that a lot more of these get done if you allow them to use your name.
Right.
So I guess we're recommending that you go ahead and let them know who's filling out this form. It just holds more weight if it's got a name attached to it. Okay, once you file a complaint, does FMCSA, do they get back with you within 30 days, or how's that work?
It's not been our experience. A lot of times you're not going to hear nothing. Sometimes you will. We have seen in cases where there might be a letter sent out and within a week acknowledging the complaint. And then we've had instances where the member actually got a phone call from someone at the FMCSA saying that they were investigating it.
Now, I think our experience shows us that if they get one complaint, you're probably not going to hear anything about it. But if they get more than one complaint, there might be an issue. They're going to look into it.
Right. Like I said, we've seen basically more people that files a complaint against one entity, whether it's a broker or motor carrier or whatever, seems to get a higher priority with FMCSA to investigate this than just a single complaint. However, I still would encourage you to file that single complaint because you don't know who else that you don't know may be filing the complaint also with the same carrier or broker or whatever. But again, if you've got some buddies that's driving for a company, whether you're owner-operator, company driver, bus driver, whatever, and you guys all got the same complaint, I really would encourage you to each individual file a separate complaint, and that definitely, well, I'm certain, will get FMC's attention.
It does you no good for the group of drivers to get together and say, all right, let's file a complaint together. And so they fill out a great complaint and they send it in, but only they send it in as one person. It's not going to have the impact that it would be if each one of them individually sent it in.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, so that brings me to the next question. If I go to all this trouble, is it worth it? Does this really work?
We like to think it is. I mean, this is basically, our only tool, I should say, to get these complaints in FMCSA. We've had some experience in-house. Sometimes we may get a letter back from like a division administrator in the state where this complaint was at.
Didn't we just recently have one of our agents file a claim against a broker? What happened?
Basically, we got the letter stating that they were going to investigate it. We had another one where we had 2 complaints on one motor carrier, and we had a member that we helped file that immediately got a telephone call from someone at the state FMCSA office that is going to investigate that. Something else I probably ought to throw out here is these complaints always get sent to the state FMCSA office and wherever the motor carrier or wherever the complaint has happened at. So it goes immediately right to the state office, what we call the division administrator.
And quite frankly, some states are much better about follow-up and carrying through on these things than other states are.
Right. But filing through the website, we would assume that, Washington is keeping an eye on these things. I would a lot rather do things on the web now because there's basically a track on where this went than just contact FMCSA, local office and go it that way.
Yeah, and, a lot of people don't understand in Washington, what happens is FMCSA contracts this management of this database out to somebody. And those people, in order to justify that they're worth their money, they want to keep track of how many complaints are filed. They can always tell you how many complaints have been filed. They may not be able to tell you what they were filed for, but that's how they justify their paycheck. And so it's important that we do follow up. We do send these in. Somebody is keeping track of how many complaints are happening.
Right. Yep.
Uh-oh. That music's telling us that we're completely out of time. We're going to have to wind this program up. Before we do get offline, I do want to thank Dale Watkins from the OOIDA Business Services Department for sharing his time and knowledge about a tool that most of us didn't even know existed. And to our listeners, I hope you'll join us for other business education programs on the OOIDA Business Education Series. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel or simply log on to www.ooidaonlineeducation.com. In the meantime, remember, you're important to us. Please take care of yourself. And don't forget, OOIDA is the only organization that's been fighting for the rights of individual truck drivers since 1973. If you'd like to join us in this fight, just give us a call at 1-800-444-5791.